Texas lawmakers advanced new voting restrictions in the very early hours after this morning. After an all-night fight in the State House, HB 6 passed in a party line vote at 3 a.m. after a marathon 17 hours of questioning and amendments from Texas Democrats. It was their attempt to water down and slow a bill they did not have the numbers to stop. Now, the bill, which empowers partisan poll watchers and adds criminal penalties for election officials who encourage voting by mail, is not headed to the governor's desk just yet. First, there will be a final reading happening right now before HB 6 is reconciled with its equally strict Senate counterpart. There are just two of hundreds of restrictive election bills introduced by Republicans across the country in response to Donald Trump's false claims that he won the 2020 election. All right, joining me now is NBC News Now correspondent Priscilla Thompson, who is in Austin, and the director of the Voting Rights and Elections Program at the Brennan Center for Justice, Myrna Perez. Priscilla, so Democrats had some success watering down the bill with a series of amendments, but do they believe that these amendments will survive once they, pair their bill with the Senate version, the state Senate version?
Well, Jeff, that's the fundamental question at this point. My colleagues inside the chamber tell me that the speakers are wrapping up now and a final vote on this is imminent. And so it is barreling towards that reconciliation process. We expect that is going to be done in a conference committee, which means that Republicans at that point will have an opportunity to add back in some of those more restrictive measures that are still in the Senate version of this bill. And they could also cut some of those amendments that were made on the House side in order to consolidate this into one bill. Now, I've spoken to advocates here who say that these amendments are not a win and they don't have a whole lot of faith in that reconciliation process. And apparently neither do House Democrats. Take a listen to what was just said on the House floor moments ago.
We're going to fix a problem that doesn't exist. That's what we're doing here. So, Representative Kaine, you have your vote, you have your majority, but guess what? I look forward to seeing you in federal court. What I know from my days of voting rights in this chamber, you may have the vote today, but we are all equal in federal court. And history's on our side.
And that is a message being echoed by voting rights advocates here who tell me that all options are on the table. And this, as we expect that if and when that bill does make it to Governor Abbott's desk, he will sign it into law. Jeff?
And Myrna, as we've reported here before, state lawmakers across the country have introduced 361 bills in 47 states. Not all of them will progress to the point where they could be considered actually even by the state houses. But which laws or which bills in which states give you the greatest amount of concern?
I think we need to be mindful about what these laws in toto are suggesting. It is a clear backlash against an unprecedented turnout. We had Americans say very clearly in the 2020 election that they care about voting. They are willing to brave a once-in-a-century pandemic. And what we see legislatures doing is going in and instead of looking at ways in which we can make our elections more free, fair, and accessible, they're trying to put up unnecessary barriers. One of the things that was really pernicious in Texas is that they have stopped pretending that it was trying to fix anything. They're talking about future elections. And what does that future election look like? Different demographics, different political winds, ones in which put the leaders of the Texas legislature right now in job security peril. And that is not what we should be using our legislative process for. Our legislative process should not be manipulated so that folks who are on the wrong side of political and demographic changes are not are going to be able to guarantee a job. This is a situation in which voters are supposed to be choosing their politicians, not the other way around.
Well, give us a sense. I mean, is this a coordinated, collaborative effort among Republicans in these many state legislatures?
There's certainly a lot of ties and information sharing that we are seeing. We're seeing many of the same kinds of tactics be introduced. There have been some organizations that have been bragging about providing guidance and support to legislators that want to make it harder to vote. But what I do think we see is some anxiety over changing demographics and some anxiety over the political changes that are going to come from those changing demographics. And we see an increasing defiance on the part of politicians to avoid what it is that their voters are telling them. Their voters are telling them they care about voting. They care about free, fair, and accessible elections. They want it to be easier to vote. They want voting to be more convenient. They want our democracy to be more robust and inclusive. And we see politicians throwing up barriers, moving in the wrong direction, and effectively ignoring what the public is telling them.
And we're looking at a live shot there on the screen of lawmakers in the Texas State House voting on SB 1. A question to you, Myrna, about the timing. It strikes me that a lot of these state legislatures are part-time. They're part-time legislatures. A lot of them adjourn for the year at the end of June. Is that one of the reasons why we're seeing this push move so quickly right now?
Well, certainly folks want to get their legislative activities done before the session ends. But I think the fact that we see these changes are coming because we had an election which communities of all kinds showed up to vote. We saw an increased turnout among many different segments of our population, including those populations that have been traditionally marginalized or disenfranchised. I think that kind of power that is demonstrated by showing up in those kinds of numbers is really making people nervous.
And Priscilla, I'm told you have some news. What do you have?
Yes, that vote just took place, and that bill did pass out of the House. It passed 78 to 64 is what my colleague inside the chamber tells me. So it is headed on its way either back to the Senate or ultimately into that reconciliation, that conference committee that will continue making changes and get a final bill on the books here.
And Myrna, in the seconds we have left, what happens absent federal action here if the Senate isn't able to move voting rights legislation?
We're going to see voters having to stand up for their rights to vote and expressing their desires at the ballot box. We're going to see people running into federal court. We're going to see counter mobilization and counter legislation. Voters care about voting, and they are going to remember what politicians in Texas and Florida and Georgia are doing.
Myrna Perez and Priscilla Thompson, my thanks to the both of you.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.